I'm Samara Garrett. In this episode of The Buzzword, we look at some of the barriers LGBTIQA+ people face when accessing AOD services. We talk about how services can be more inclusive and hear how AOD organisations are continually working to provide inclusive and person-centred AOD programs.
I'm 56, she, her, and I identify as a lesbian.
I'm 48 and my pronouns are he, him. I identify as a HIV positive gay man.
I'm 27, non-binary and queer, and I use they, them pronouns.
I'm 28, she, her, identifying as female. I identify, as a lesbian or pansexual, also exploring asexuality.
I am 48, my pronouns are she, her. I identify as queer.
I have a friend whose partner, the partner is a friend but a more distant friend. You know, they've separated and recently, but after many, many years of struggling with this. So I guess I've been sort of watching that struggle, and no, they just did not want to access any services or support, even at the expense of the relationship in the end.
So I would have my best friend, she drinks. She considers it an issue where she would drink to cope with psychological distress and would deal with hangovers and having big drinking nights out and having Saturdays unable to do anything. Which then she repeats maybe almost every week. I think they are concerned about it, but then they haven't sought support because that's not part of their culture. They're from an Asian European background. Where they're from, there aren't any support services, so it doesn't come naturally for them to think, I can seek support for this.
I did struggle with nicotine addiction, something that I've recently stopped. I was smoking a lot and I thought it was fine. I initially thought it was cool, and then I thought it would help me just de-stress, and it does, but it also then adds up. The stress comes back tenfold. And I realized I wasn't being kind to myself and to my body, so I thought I should stop it. It was a big journey. I did some hypnotherapy around it. I actually, interestingly, took some shrooms to make sense of what my connections with nicotine were, and that kind of helped me break them as well. I've not been smoking 4 months now.
I do know people that really struggle. So my partner at the time was a very heavy drinker. So he did reach out to some services, to Smart Recovery. He didn't find that very helpful for him. But so he did work through it, but still to this day does really struggle with not drinking.
My bad patch was probably 8 to 10 years ago. And that bad patch lasted for a decade. So it's a good long time of giving it a good go, and it's a good long time of abstinence as well. And also I think it just ended up being about choice. It was about saying, you can have as much of that as you like, but is that really what you want? The abstinence model works for a lot of people. It certainly didn't work for us. It was more about the choice. So we provide a lot of scope, understandably, for people that are trying to quit cigarettes, for example, and it's very sort of reasonable and understood that it's going to take you a few goes before you do that, but we don't necessarily equate that same pattern with drug use. And if you do go on a bender, the punitive stuff is not really very useful. I think so. I think it would have had to have been and would still have to be after that initial negotiation with yourself about where you're at with that. And then accountability of having other services around. Not that many of the services actually judge your usage, but it's just about having to be in front of another service where they are going to ask how are you going with it, and you have to provide an answer. Whether it's true or not is another question.
Reducing stigma in the community is one of ATODA's strategic goals. That's because we know that people with alcohol and other drug issues still face huge amounts of stigma in society. And stigma is often a really big barrier to people seeking the harm reduction or treatment help that they need, which is a real pity. People don't want to admit to anyone else, or often even themselves, that maybe they need some help. That's a real pity, because alcohol and other drug services are really welcoming of people as people and really work to reduce the amount of stigma that people face. People from LGBTIQA+ community experience stigma and discrimination all too often for other reasons than drug use as well.
When it comes to drug and alcohol use, there is so much stigma in our society, and so much stigma historically in the service system when people have needed support or treatment. So you think structurally around things, legally, relationally, there's so much stigma and shame that means that people go internal with a lot of issues in life like drug and alcohol, and then struggle to reach out for any input, which just exacerbates things. We know that a lot of problematic substance use is related to shame, and being able to have compassion and acceptance for yourself is so integral in being able to move past problematic use, but also just live your own life to the fullest. Recognising that stigma and shame is often a part of the development of substance-related issues, that then when someone reaches out to a service system, the last thing that we could possibly want to do is to reinforce that and send someone essentially underground.
So we find with our clients is they've experienced stigma in a number of ways. So around their substance use, there are just terms of language that are really derogatory or labelling. We do not use those terms. We will never use those terms with our clients. And the same with people's sexual and gender identity. We'll ask people what terms and what language they would like us to use with them. It's an individual thing. Simple things around language can be judgmental and therefore labelling somebody, and then they have that stigma.
They would have the rainbow flags and all the other flags available. They would have something very obvious at the front entrance that everyone's welcome. They would go to the trouble of checking pronouns and just not making assumptions, which, oh my God, so common. They would just take that load off that people had to be hyper-vigilant about how they're going to be treated.
I think what would help is probably in the messaging. I think there's a lot of generalised drug and alcohol counselling, and people are unsure about, is it an abstinence model? Is it a harm-min model? Like, what is that going to involve? And I think if you're going to commit to it, you're like anybody else with an issue, you're scared about what it's going to involve. So I think that would help in actually delivering services, would be clearer on what the hell that looks like.
I think it's important to make it community specific. That could be a way to go around it, because if there are groups that are not community specific, you can't really, how do you inform that every participant is not homophobic and transphobic? It's hard to do that. So it's safer to create a space where it's just people from the community, just being very vocal about their support for the community and marketing the programs in that manner, and talking about the specifications that we do work within the community. We have cultural competence to work within the community, not only for the people who are a part of the community, but also people outside the community who might want to join that group, to have that expectation that this group is supportive of the communities.
From seeing advertisement saying that we welcome the community, or we are LGBT friendly, or we work with the community. I guess perhaps even active outreach of saying we are here, perhaps even have some sessions that are already scheduled for people to just join, like whether online or drop in whenever they want to, for it to just sit there and wait for people to drop in. I think that's a great way to do it, because people like to have that decision.
One of the best ways to confirm if the alcohol and other drug sector is working well with community is by looking at the workforce. In 2021, AOD surveyed the workforce in the ACT, and one of the questions was about sexual orientation. Between 12 and 19% of people working in the alcohol and other drug sector identify as LGBTIQA+. In other words, when a client and a worker meet, it's probably more likely that the worker will be LGBTIQA+ than the client will be. What I hope and think this means is that LGBTIQA community's perspectives are valued and integrated within Canberra's alcohol and other drug services.
Over 15% of our staff identify as LGBTQI+ community members. So we're really proud to have a diverse workforce that hopefully is some of the way towards being reflective of the community that we're working with.
We have staff that identify as LGBTI. The self-disclosure is up to the staff member. We don't enforce that or inhibit that. That is absolutely up to the staff member.
Does this mean that the sector can tick the LGBTIQA box and move on? Well, of course it doesn't. Services need to keep working to be welcoming to people of all backgrounds, the same way that two people meeting and genuinely engaging with each other have to work constantly to really understand and respect each other.